Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, welcome to the shed, welcome here if it's the first time. This video is a bit of an experiment, a bit of a build, an experimental build to do with clock repairs. Now you would have gathered that from the title. I'm currently doing a clock rebuild for a customer, and I need a mainspring. Well, I've got a let down tool, but I need a mainspring winder so that I can safely remove it from the arbor, pull the spring out, clean it, inspect it, and then put it back in. So at the moment this mainspring is retained in a special retaining clip that I bought recently, and with that retaining clip I also got a mainspring winder tool. However, I'm not going to use it, or I might have a play with it one day. But I did a bit of checking, and I only found 2 videos on YouTube that featured this. Both of the guys didn't like it. One of the guys seemed quite experienced, and for whatever reason it wouldn't work with his mainspring, and he ended up having to put it in a proper mainspring winder. The other guy was fairly new to clock repairs, and he got himself into quite a lot of strife, and it nearly exploded in his shed. So the only reviews I've seen on these mainspring winders are, the suggestions were throw it in the scrap metal bin, and the other suggestion was the company shouldn't be allowed to still market them. Apparently they're dangerous, they're not that practical. They can work, and yes, if you were in a cave in an apocalypse and it's the only tool you had and you had to get your clock going, you could probably get away with it, but I'm not going to use it. This video, we're going to make our own more successful clock mainspring winder based on a few designs I've seen online. Now, I'll warn you right up, this is going to be rough. I grew up on a farm. Farmers are renowned for being able to fashion something together very roughly, but it works, and you use what you have at hand, which kind of fits in with my ultimate recycler mantra. I will probably make a better one down the track, but I need to make something to do this job. I will be filming this. I am filming this clock repair, by the way. It'll be coming out soon. I thought I might as well film this build. Let's see if we can make ourselves a successful mainspring winder from what we can find lying around the shed for zero cost. And after a brief search around my shed, I found enough stuff, I think, to get me out of trouble. There is no doubt probably better stuff in my shed, but, you know, I had to work with what I could find. Most of you would understand that. I've got a piece of hardwood here. It's actually part of a bed frame, but that will do for our timber frame for making this winder. I've got just a few general pieces of hardware, hose clamps, washers, a piece of, that's a bucket handle, but it's just the right size wire to use for a latch, a door handle. This is a piece of brass, but it doesn't have to be, it can be anything, just a steel rod you could use, a couple of little cotter pins, a piece of all thread, some more nuts and washers, and probably the trickiest bit in this whole lot, I've got a little collet chuck here, a collet chuck I think you call it. Now, it's basically just out of a tapping set, similar to this one here, just for when you're cutting threads with a tap. And this one I found in a box had actually lost its handle, which works fine. So my handle and winder is really just going to be my 3/8 socket drive. It doesn't need to be a ratchet, I don't think. I'll work that out as I go. I haven't built one before, so we're just going to make it up as we go along. An extension, and I've used a long reach socket here, I think it's 1/2 inch, and an extension, because I don't need, you wouldn't normally need this, but the socket is a 1/4 inch drive, so I need, not an extension, an adapter to take it up to 3/8 drive. The 1/2 inch just seems to fit the end, the shank of this collet chuck quite nicely, so I'm going to sacrifice that socket and I'll drill a hole through there so we can bolt those together. It's a little loose, but it'll do for this job. So first step, I guess, is to probably drill a hole and mount that in there with a suitable bolt. And then we'll probably make up a rough frame just out of the timber, and we'll start assembling it. We won't need all of this all thread. I'll chop down a suitable amount, and we just need one end of this piece of wire here. So you'll see it sort of come together as I go. Hopefully we don't have too many problems, and hopefully it works. Being a cheap socket, it shouldn't be too hard. Let's center punch a spot to drill. Yeah, that marked very easily. I just remembered I have a pedestal drill that I can use now. Alright, there's our hole. We just need to make it the right size now. So there we go, I've now attached the socket. I found a suitable bolt, although it's a little bit long. So we'll put a washer and a nut on, and then we'll just cut it back with a hacksaw just to keep it neat. And that completes, once I tighten it up and trim that up, that completes the first stage of our build. And now we essentially have a collet chuck with a 1/4 inch drive adapter. So that should work great. Next stage involves building our frame. So we've got our chuck there. This is what's going to mount into that. That's the square of the mainspring arbor. So that will fit in there. So we're just going to lay it out and sort of eyeball it to see what lengths we need. So if we can get that to balance there somehow. In fact, let's put this in. Okay, so that's assembled there now. And we can add our extension. Oh, we need our adapter. Where's that gone? There it is. Now our extension. And our ratchet. Well, our handle basically. So that's the length we want that end. Now this end we need to support the other end of the mainspring arbor, and I was just going to drill a little hole in the end of the awl thread and taper it so that it locates that pin. And if we have a slightly larger hole, it doesn't need to spin at fast revolutions, so just so it locates it and it can't possibly slip out. And then I'm just planning to make this rod adjustable by having a nut and washer on each side of the timber frame. So the other one will be basically like that, timber frame here, and we can then move the awl thread in and out to enable us to get the spring off and to push it on to locate. So we want to allow a bit of space, given that I'm not sure how much room I need to be able to get the spring off once it's unwound. I think a fair bit of adjustment doesn't really hurt, so I think about there actually. And this end of the frame needs to be somewhere in the middle, I think. Although this doesn't want to be adjustable, this wants to be fixed so that this end comes in and out. So I think if that's the case, and I was just going to use these flat washers and hose clamps just to locate it either side so it can't move back and forward. We need enough room on the outside of the frame to be able to wind. We don't want to be brushing our fingers against the timber frame. So I think we'll probably have that an inch or two in, and perhaps that one about there. So that gives us a rough dimension for our frame. I'll measure that up and I'll start cutting some timber. So I'm estimating about 220 mil inside the frame. I think that'll give us enough to work with. I told you this is a bit agricultural. Let's cut some timber. Okay, we'll square off our end before we start measuring. And our bottom piece needs to be, what do we say, 220 plus. Now, do we make the bottom plate longer and then the uprights on top of it? Or do we make the bottom plate 220 and our uprights into the end? Don't think it really matters. This is just a rough build, so let's just measure 220 for our bottom plate, and then we'll just butt the uprights onto the end. 220, and we need to work out, of course, how high we're going to have it. But let's just get our base plate cut first. Well, that took a bit of cutting. I think as the timber's so hard, but there's also a fair chance that my wood saw is a little blunt. So I think I'll use the circular saw next. Now we need to work out the height. I don't think it really matters. I think if we go about 160 or 170 mil high, should be ample room. Much easier. And straighter. Okay, so there's our base plate, and that's what our basic frame's going to look like, nice and strong. And the good thing with hardwood is that when we run a piece of steel through a hole, like a basic bearing, it's the hardwood's going to be much more robust than something like a soft pine would be. So I think that's going to work fine. All we need to do is now assemble that. So I'll just drill in each end and put a few long screws into the bottom piece. So that's got our frame assembled. It's nice and solid. Being hardwood, it's quite heavy. I'm more than happy with that being strong enough for the job. Now we're going to drill some holes through probably about 1 inch down central. We'll go the same each end because they do need to line up, and they'll need to be around about the same diameter because the shank of the extension here is the same as the awl thread. So I think it was about a 12mm hole. So we'll get a nice straight hole through each end. Hopefully they line up, and then we can start assembling the bulk of it. We do have to do a second hole through this end for this piece of brass, and we'll cut that down. And that's really just to hold the tension, which you'll see when we demonstrate it. Once we wind the spring up, rather than have a ratchet set up, I'm just going to have that stop the handle spinning, and we'll have that so that it can slide in out of the road to allow us to crank it or to wind it up, so to speak. Obviously it has to be a lot shorter than that, and it'll just be captured in the wood and be allowed to slide back and forward, so that's easy. The other thing we have to do, other than the awl thread the other end, is we do have to have an anchor point on the base here, which I'm going to use this door handle for, and that's what this piece of wire is for. So I think we'll be able to attach that securely to the door handle, and I'll just refashion the end here so that it can actually hook through the loop of the mainspring, and then that can sort of swing out of the road when we need to, and that will actually anchor the loop end as we're winding it up. So I think it's coming together, and I think it's going to work. Okay, I used a great big long drill bit, even though it's not quite long enough to go right through both ends. It just gave me much more of a sighter on the drill to make sure I had it going straight. So hopefully it's pretty well lined up. And it looks not too bad. Might be going up a little bit. My drill's nearly flat, and it's only a cheap drill anyway. This one is a little bit smaller than I need. I think there's about 11mm, so that gives me a little bit of room to file them perhaps if I need to, or just run the next size up drill bit through and straighten it up a little bit. But I think we're pretty good. Boy, this old hardwood really grabs onto the drill bits. Let's try with our brass piece, which is way smaller than the hole, but I think we're pretty good there. It looks nice and straight to me. Excellent. And down this way. Yeah, that's pretty good. All right, we just need to make those holes the right size, and then we're able to put our pieces through them. But we want a nice snug fit. So that worked out well. It's nice and firm, and when I'm pushing it right through, it almost goes in the other end. That's not too bad. We don't need that much precision. That's going to be perfectly fine. So we will adjust the length of this awl thread at some stage. We don't need that much. I do have to put a little hole in the end of it. And the extension for the socket does fit quite snugly and neatly in here. And it spins nicely. We don't want too much friction on that, but there's not a lot of movement, so that'll be fine. Okay, so we need to set the length of our extension here with our modification on the end of it, and then we'll install some washers, and the hose clamps are really just to hold this part from sliding back and forward through the timber frame. So we'll set that up first because that'll be fixed. Then we can modify this one to suit it, and then we have to drill another hole for the other bar. We'll work out where that's going to go once we get the handle all on and just see how it sits. I think somewhere around there will be fine. I nearly didn't worry about this hose clamp, thinking that it will sit up against the end there, so maybe just a washer and that, but remembering this can actually come off, and we wouldn't want that to come off while we've got tension on the spring. So so this needs to be fixed, and I think around about that length there will give us a fair bit of room on the crank side. We don't want it too far away because we've got to have that bar going through to stop it, remember. So I reckon maybe even a little closer, probably about there. We'll do the clamps up there and see how it looks. Hose clamps are probably not the best method, but as I said, it was just using what I could find in the shed. You would certainly be much better with a collar with some grub screws, but these will work perfectly fine and won't come loose. Now, that spins pretty good. Now, it's a bit firm. Maybe we don't want it that tight. We might just back one of these clamps off just a little bit. We could probably put a smear of grease inside the timber too, just to help it turn more easily. Yeah, that's better. That's not going to bind up. Interestingly, I was a little concerned about the slight sloppiness of the collet chuck into the end of the socket, but then the bolt's done up tight, so that's fine. We've got a lot more movement in the socket adapter, but I don't think the movement's going to matter, because once it's connected to the arbor and it's anchored the other end, it's not going to matter a little bit of movement. That'll be fine. All right, I'm happy with that. Let's work out where we're going to put this other hole for our stop, and how long we need to make it. And then I'll drill 2 fine holes through each end and put some cotter pins through so it can't actually fall out at a critical moment. So it's really starting to look the part now. We've got our brass rod in there which slides in and out, and with the split pins through the ends it can't actually go anywhere else, and it comes out far enough that it will stop the ratchet handle from turning under the pressure of the spring. I did adjust these clamps a little bit just to slide the whole thing back a bit, because I was kind of running out of room this end. So let's put the mainspring arbor into the chuck there. So we don't have a lot of room left over, and our awl thread's going to go through here, and I still need to drill a hole in the end of it, and it will press up against the other end of the spring arbor and capture at that end so it can't fall out. Looks like we have a little bit of wonkiness here, but it's going to work fine. As I said, it's not a high revolution thing. We need enough room for our washer and nut in here, so I've got plenty of room there, and we'll have one the other side, and then I might leave an inch out the end just in case we need it. If well, we're not going to get much of a smaller arbor than that, I guess. So we'll leave a little bit of extra, and we'll have a nut and a washer on that side as well. So we're just about ready. Well, all the main shaft is done. We need to work out our little hook and handle thing on the base, and then we're ready to actually give it a test. So what I'll do now is I'll just drill a hole in the end of the awl thread, not very deep, just enough that it can hold the end of the arbor. That will finish off that part. And then, yeah, we'll have to just mount up the handle and just shape this bit of heavy wire just to work in, catch into the loop of the mainspring, and that will then allow the mainspring to wind up. I've shortened the awl thread down. It's poking through the bottom of the bracket here, but it gives me access for the pedestal drill so I can get a nice straight hole in the end of it. That should be plenty deep enough. I'll get a larger drill and just chamfer around the top just so it's smooth and it guides the end of the arbor in straight. That should be great. Okay, let's see how that fits up. We'll get our other washer in here and now put our nut. We'll take the... Actually, we've got a quick disconnect. Let's do that. It might prove handy having that socket there to just plug in and unplug. Okay, so put that back on there. And now we need to extend this piece in. And that locates on the arbor nicely. Okay, the nut's not so free on this thread, a piece of all thread. It must have some burrs on it. That's going to be a bit of a problem. We'll have to clean that up because I want these nuts, yeah, it just jammed. I want these nuts to move very freely. So I'll have to get some burrs off here. I'll clean it up with a thread file perhaps. Okay, I think we're right now. So we'll feed this back through, put this washer on, and this nut. And that's much better. Alright, so let's locate that on the end of the arbor. We can tighten that up and that's going to work beautifully. Let's push our lever in here and give it a crank. Oh, that looks fantastic. Proof of the pudding will be once we anchor the end of the spring, and we'll see if we can wind it up, release the clamp, and then gradually let the spring out. It's looking promising. So all I've got to do now then is find somewhere suitable to mount this. Not sure if I need it this side or that side or right underneath. And hopefully we can get a piece of this rusty wire to hook in and we'll shape the other end of it. Hope it's not high tensile. And we've just got to make sure it goes through this hook. It does fit nicely. So we'll fashion a piece to go straight through the loop of the end of the spring. Luckily that was nice and soft and easy to shape. So you can see I've got it fits through the loop of the spring. And I haven't secured the handle yet, but I think I'll go right up against that end. This thing can move if it needs to either direction. And I decided to come in from this way rather than the other end so that it's less likely to cause any issues with the brass teeth of the great wheel. So I reckon that will be fine. It's going to attach the end of the spring nicely. I think I'll just put a couple of good solid wood screws into there. I'll just pre-drill them first so that they go nice and deep into the hardwood. And I reckon we're nearly ready for a test. And there we go, nicely secured. I did have to take this end off to put that screw in because I wanted to pre-drill it, especially being at the end of the piece of timber. So if you're asking why I didn't glue the ends before I screw them on, that's the reason. So that's really good. That's plenty strong enough. It's can't come off. I closed the loop up at the end so it can't come off. And it's actually handy being able to just unplug this, even though I could wind the nut back quite easily. So if we plug that back on and now push that forward to locate, roll that nut back so that it can't disengage, and now it's all secure. And our loop, our little arm here goes into the end of the spring, into the loop end, making sure it doesn't go through and touch the gearing. And then we've just got to actually wind it. Now it's ready for a test. So first thing I need to do is clamp it to the bench just to be safe. And then I've got a sort of a good solid base to work with. Obviously spin it around this way. And our handle needs to go over the end of the bench so that we can wind it. So I'll set it up and we'll see if we can unwind that spring. We have to wind it up first, remember, to get the clamp off. and then let it gradually unwind in a controlled fashion. I will find a garden glove or a leather glove or something just to make sure I can then hold my hand there to stop the springs that are bulging out. Sometimes they release pressure and bulge out different directions, but I think that'll work quite well and quite safely. And now the moment of truth for this little creation. I'm that confident that I'm putting 2 gloves on. You can't be too safe with these things. And one thing I'm not sure about is whether the spring will sort of bulge out to this side because there's nothing stopping it, so I may kind of have to hold it with my glove, but that should work all right. So it's tied on the collet. I've got the thing anchored to the bench, so we need to spin it round to get this hook in here. Oops, that's the trouble with the ratchet. I can't go back the other way because I don't want to disconnect the spring from the arbor. I think that'll be all right. So first improvement I think I'll get rid of the ratchet. I'll just have a solid bar. Perhaps I've got a couple of old ratchets. I might just weld them up, or weld one of them up to make a solid bar. There we go. Put the hook in there. So now we need to wind this way, and it should start to tension the spring up. The hook has it's anchoring it now. We've got to make sure the hook doesn't slide out. I might have to angle that a bit more, although it seems to be pretty good. I might just put my fingers behind that. It's not going to hurt with the really thick gloves on. Nothing's hitting the great wheel, so we won't hurt the teeth. And I can feel a fair bit of tension on it now. So that retaining clip should come loose at some stage shortly. It's spinning over nicely. Don't have any issues there. Okay, I think the clip's coming loose now. Yes, it does feel loose. So I'll just slide this rod through. Just past the handle of the ratchet. Oh, there doesn't seem to be any back pressure on that. Oh yeah, okay, that's hitting. Now this clip is starting to work its way out a bit, so we've got to be careful of that. So holding the spring in the right spot. Can we get the clip off? Yep, there we go. So our clip is off. Our retainer is off. So I'll just hold that spring there because I suspect it might want to bulge that way. And then I can push that bar back in. And let it unwind. Okay, it doesn't want to take off. That's probably a good sign. I think what's happening is that the extension through the block of wood here is fairly firm, and it's actually giving it enough resistance that the spring isn't really making it fly out of control. So I can easily, I really don't need the glove on the right hand side, I can easily allow the spring to unwind without any fear of it going berserk. You can see it's stretching out now, it's opening out. We've lost most of the power now, it's just about completely unwound. So that worked very safely, I think. I think that must be just about it. Is this little thing loose? Yep. There we go. So that felt actually very safe. I'm well out of the danger zone anyway. I think the only improvements I need to make there are perhaps put a little bit more of a bend on that linkage so that it doesn't want to slide out. And it's fine just to put your fingers with the glove behind the spring to keep it sort of all aligned. That's really good. So now we can just loosen off that nut, slide that back, undo the collet, the chuck. Oh, that's tight. Now, well, let's unplug it from there. So there we go. We've unwound our spring quite safely. So now I'll actually clean the spring as part of the clock project I'm doing. But before we do that, let's see if we can put it back together. So the chuck's still actually on there secure, so I can just plug that straight back on the square. Slide our end piece in, do the nut up. Doesn't have to be tight, just to stop any movement. And now we just need to hook our hook back in the end of the spring. Like so. And now to wind it up, we've got to change the ratchet. Yeah, I definitely got to get rid of the ratchet and just have a normal T-bar is all I need. Am I going the wrong way? I am. I've got to go this way. Oh yeah, we've got to wind it up the same way we wound it up the first time. I'm going to get rid of the right-hand glove. I don't think it's necessary. Okay, it's winding up very easily. Yeah, just keeping the spring aligned is probably the trickiest bit. It's actually rubbing on the side of the great wheel there. So maybe I should have kept my right glove on. Maybe if I just hold it like that, that's probably the best way. I guess the only risk doing that is making sure that the glove material doesn't get caught in the spring. But that's wound it up pretty good. It gets easier as it gets tighter. Well, that's wound it up very nicely. So that might be enough. Let's put our rod through there. But as I said, the friction in the timber seems to stop this wanting to flick back anyway. Okay, lucky I have my glove on. And we do have a problem just with this little hook piece. I think I have to just angle it down a little bit more so that it doesn't slip out like it just did. But that was working pretty well. We were pretty well just about to put our clamp on. I'll just have one more go. But you can see even when it does let go in something like this little jig, it's all enclosed. It can't fly across the room and I'm well out of the danger zone. So that's good. And we can wind it up again. Let's see if we can get the clip on this time. But I do need to modify that little hook. Alright, that might be enough for us. Now, I'm a little bit hesitant to put my right hand over there now. We'll better put our right glove back on. Okay, we're mostly on. Just want to make sure that wire link doesn't drop out because that's what caused our problems. Put our clip on. And we're easily wound up enough for that. Whoopsie, it's wanting to escape again. Yeah, I think I need a bend on the upright just to kink it across a bit more. But that's holding all right. Let's release some of the spring tension and allow the retainer to clamp it. And there we go. So our retainer clip is back on. And we can remove that from the machine. So the clip probably should have been around a little bit further. But as you can see, it does work quite well. I think it's quite safe. I do need to modify that clip. And perhaps definitely do away with the ratchet and just have a T-bar. And maybe it might be worth having a bit of a shield on the back here just to hold the spring fairly square. But it's actually not bad just putting your fingers behind that. More the trouble was this little clip was flicking out. Anyway, that will do for this video. As far as their build goes, I'm happy with my design, although I did copy off a few off YouTube, but I've made it fairly simple. I've made it with what I've had in my shed. And I will modify that clip at some stage, but this will work well enough for me to do this clock project I'm on now. So there we go. Pretty successful, I think. So I'll finish this experimental video up now. Success, I think. It worked really well, and I just tweaked the angle of that little latch, and I undid the spring again, and it went perfectly. It had showed no signs of slipping out. So easy adjustment. I think this works really well. And you know what? I was going to make this really quickly and really roughly just to see if my ideas were going to work and other people's ideas that I've incorporated. And I don't think I'll even build a better one. I think just a couple of tweaks and this will do everything I need. Not bad for a couple of hours mucking around in the shed. Absolutely no expense. And now I can get on with this clock repair video that I'll bring to you shortly. Thanks guys for watching. Catch you in the next one. Bye for now.